Welcome to sleepy Japan. Tonight, we drift together into a quiet story from Japan, a tale shaped by stillness, tradition, and the soft rhythm of night. Before we begin, take a slow breath in and exhale gently. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands rest. Let your thoughts begin to settle as the world around you softens into calm. Imagine a peaceful evening, light from a simple paper lantern drifting across the room, a cool breeze moving just beyond the window. And in the distance, a single temple bell echoing through the night. Each sound carries you deeper into rest. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to be. Just breathe and let the night open gently around you. Feel peace moving through your body, from your chest to your shoulders, to the quiet rhythm of your breath. The world outside grows silent. Only the sound of your breathing remains, and the soft promise of dreams waiting to unfold. Now, as the moon rises above the hills and the night deepens, let us begin tonight's story. The Grateful Crane. Long, long ago, in a time when the world moved slowly and the seasons turned with quiet certainty, there lived a young man in a far-off land. His name has been forgotten by the years, carried away like autumn leaves on the wind. But his story remains, soft and luminous as moonlight on snow. He was a farmer, this young man, and his life was simple. Each morning would rise before the sun had fully wakened, stepping out into the grey-blue stillness of dawn. The air would be cool against his skin, carrying with it the scent of earth and growing things. He would walk through his small fields, his feet leaving dark prints in the dew-wet grass, and he would tend to the rice plants that swayed gently in their flooded beds, their green stalks bending like dancers in prayer. His home was a modest farmhouse, nestled between rolling hills that wore different colours with each passing season. In spring, they were dressed in the pale green of new growth. In summer, they deepened to emerald, rich and full. Autumn painted them gold and amber, and winter wrapped them in silence and white. The young man lived alone, but he did not feel lonely. He had the company of the wind, the friendship of the birds that visited his fields, and the steady, patient rhythm of the land itself. His days followed a pattern as old as farming itself. Wake, work, rest, plant, tend, harvest. Season after season, year after year, he lived in harmony with the turning of the earth. He was neither rich nor poor. He had enough rice to eat, a roof that kept out the rain, and a small fire to warm him when winter came. He asked for nothing more. But one day, in the quiet space between autumn and winter, when the air grows sharp and the sky becomes a deeper blue, something happened that would change his life forever. The afternoon light was golden and slanting. The young man was walking home from his fields, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose. Long shadows stretched across the land, and the air had taken on that particular quality of stillness that comes just before dusk, when the day begins to hold its breath. As he walked along the narrow path that wound between his fields, lost in the peaceful emptiness of his own thoughts, he heard a sound. It was a cry, sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet like a stone dropped into still water. The young man stopped, his body instantly alert, his senses reaching out to understand what he had heard. There it was again, a cry of distress, high and keening, coming from somewhere nearby. He left the path and moved toward the sound, his feet careful on the uneven ground. And then he saw it. A brilliant white crane, its feathers pure as fresh snow, had fallen to the earth in the middle of his field. It lay there, one wing spread awkwardly, the other folded tight against its body. The bird's long neck curved in an arc of pain, and its black eyes were bright with fear. The young man approached slowly, not wanting to startle the creature further. As he drew closer, he saw what had befallen it. An arrow, cruel and sharp, had pierced clean through one of the crane's wings, and blood, dark as evening, stained those perfect white feathers. The young man's heart clenched with pity. He had always been gentle with living things, never taking more from the land than he needed, never causing harm without purpose. To see such a beautiful creature wounded this way filled him with a deep sadness. "Poor thing," he murmured softly, kneeling down beside the crane. "Who would do such a thing to you?" The crane turned its head to look at him, and in those dark eyes, the young man saw something that moved him deeply. Not just pain, not just fear, but a kind of intelligence, a kind of understanding that seemed to reach beyond the boundary between human and bird. "Be still," he said gently. "I will help you." He removed the travelling sack from his shoulder and spread it on the ground. Then, moving with great care, he grasped the arrow where it had pierced the crane's wing. The bird trembled beneath his touch, but it did not struggle. It seemed to understand that he meant no harm. The young man pulled, swift and sure, and the arrow came free. The crane cried out once, a sound that pierced him like the arrow itself. But then it was done. He tore a strip of cloth from the hem of his jacket and wrapped it carefully around the wound, binding it gently but firmly. His hands, calloused from work but tender in their touch, moved with a farmer's practical kindness. "There," he said softly when he had finished. "The wound will heal now, in time. You must rest, and you must be careful." He sat back on his heels and watched as the crane slowly, cautiously began to test its wing. It spread it part way, winced, folded it back. But already the bird seemed stronger, its eyes clearer, its neck held higher. The young man smiled. "When you are ready," he said, "you should fly away from here. The hunters who shot you may still be nearby. Go somewhere safe, fly high, where their arrows cannot reach." He stood up, gathered his things, and began to walk away, giving the crane space and time to recover. But after a few steps, he heard the sound of wings, great and powerful, beating the air. He turned and saw the crane rising, its white form luminous against the darkening sky. It circled once, twice, 3 times above his head, and each time it passed overhead, it called out, a long, clear cry that sounded almost like gratitude, almost like a promise. Then it flew away, becoming smaller and smaller against the vastness of the sky. until it was no more than a white speck, and then nothing at all, swallowed by distance and the coming night. The young man stood there for a long moment, watching the empty sky. A strange feeling had settled in his chest, something warm and bright and inexplicable. He did not know what to call it. Perhaps it was simply the satisfaction of having helped a creature in need. Perhaps it was something more. Eventually, he turned and continued on his way home, walking through the gathering dusk as the first stars began to appear overhead, one by one, like small cold fires being lit in the great darkness above. The house was dim and waiting. When he reached it, he slid open the door and stepped inside. The interior was lit only by the last grey light coming through the windows. He moved through the familiar space, lighting a small oil lamp, preparing a modest evening meal of rice and pickled vegetables. He ate slowly, in silence, his mind returning again and again to the image of the white crane circling above him, its cry echoing in the stillness. After he had finished eating and cleaned his bowl, he sat for a while by the small window, looking out at the night. The moon was rising, nearly full, casting silver light across the landscape. Everything was quiet. Everything was still. The young man felt at peace, in the way that one feels at peace after having done something good, something right. Eventually, sleep called to him, and he spread out his futon on the tatami floor, lay down, and closed his eyes. He fell asleep quickly, deeply, and he dreamed of white wings and distant skies. The next day unfolded like all the others. The young man rose early, worked in his fields, ate his simple meals, and as evening approached, he made his way home along the familiar path. The sky was clear, the air cool, and his body was pleasantly tired from the day's work. But as he rounded the last bend in the path, and his house came into view, he stopped abruptly, his heart suddenly beating faster. There, standing by his doorway, was a woman. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal, almost like something from a dream or a story told by firelight. Her hair was long and dark, falling straight as rain down her back. Her skin was pale and smooth, and she wore a simple kimono, pink as cherry blossoms, patterned with small white flowers. She stood very still, her hands folded gently in front of her, and when she saw him, she smiled. The young man stood frozen, not knowing what to say or do. He had never seen this woman before. He was certain of that. If he had, he would have remembered. But here she stood, at his doorway, as if she had every right to be there, as if she belonged. Slowly, uncertain, he approached. "Welcome home," the woman said, and her voice was soft and clear, like water moving over stones. "I am your wife." The young man felt as though the world had tilted beneath his feet. My wife," he stammered, "but I do not have a wife. I have never married." The woman's smile did not waver. "Nevertheless," she said gently, "I am your wife now. I have come to live with you, if you will have me." The young man shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. "But I am very poor," he said, speaking the truth plainly, as was his way. "I am only a farmer. I have little to offer. I can barely support myself, let alone a wife. I have no wealth, no family, no prospects. You should not be here. You should find someone better, someone who can give you the life you deserve." But the woman only smiled again, a smile of such warmth and gentleness that it made something inside the young man's chest tighten. She reached into the folds of her kimono and withdrew a small cloth sack, no bigger than her hand. She held it up so he could see. "Do not worry," she said. "I have brought rice. See, this sack is full. It will be enough for both of us. We will not go hungry." The young man looked at the tiny sack and felt a surge of protectiveness and concern. How could such a small amount of rice be enough? It would last them a few days at most. But there was something in the woman's eyes, something calm and certain, that made him hesitate to argue. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "Why have you come here? Who are you?" "I am someone who wishes to repay a kindness," the woman said. And though her words were simple, they carried a weight of meaning that the young man could not quite grasp. "Please," she continued, "let me stay. Let me prepare dinner for you. You have worked hard today, and you must be hungry." And indeed, he was hungry. And indeed, there was something about this woman, something about the way she stood there in the fading light, that made him want to say yes. So he did. "Very well," he said, still uncertain, still confused, but moved by something deeper than reason. "You may stay. Please, come inside." The woman bowed, a gesture of such grace and courtesy that it took his breath away. And then she stepped past him and into the house. The fire crackled to life in the hearth. The young man followed, sliding the door closed behind them. Inside, the woman moved with quiet efficiency, as if she had lived in this house all her life. She found the cooking pot, filled it with water from the clay jar in the corner, set it over the fire. She took rice from the small sack she had brought, measured it out with careful hands, and added it to the water. Soon the fire was crackling, the water beginning to bubble, and the familiar, comforting scent of cooking rice filled the small space. The young man sat on the tatami floor, watching her, still not quite believing that any of this was real. She moved like a dancer, her gestures fluid and purposeful, and there was a peacefulness about her that seemed to spread through the entire room, making everything feel warmer, softer, safer. When the rice was ready, she served it to him in a simple bowl, along with some pickled vegetables from his own stores. She served herself as well, and they ate together in companionable silence. After they had finished eating, the woman cleaned the bowls and the pot, put everything away with the same quiet grace. Then she turned to him and said, "You must be tired. You should rest." "But where will you sleep?" the young man asked, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. "I will sleep here," the woman said, gesturing to a space near the wall. "Do not worry about me. I will be comfortable." And so, because he did not know what else to do, because the day had been long and strange, and his mind was tired from trying to understand, the young man spread out his futon and lay down. The woman settled herself in her chosen spot, arranging a thin blanket around her shoulders. The young man lay in the darkness, listening to the soft sounds of her breathing, and he thought about the crane he had saved the day before. He thought about the small sack of rice that was somehow supposed to feed them both. He thought about the woman's words, "I am someone who wishes to repay a kindness." But he was too tired to think clearly, and soon sleep claimed him, pulling him down into dreams that were filled with white wings and mysterious smiles. Morning came softly through the windows. When he woke, the woman was already awake, preparing breakfast. The small sack of rice sat in the corner, and when the young man looked at it, he noticed something strange. It seemed just as full as it had been the night before. But perhaps, he thought, he was mistaken. Perhaps he simply had not looked carefully enough. He said nothing about it. Instead, he rose, washed his face in the basin of water she had prepared for him, and ate the breakfast she had made. Then he went out to work in his fields, as he always did, and the woman stayed behind, moving about the house with that same quiet grace, tidying, cleaning, making the space feel more like a home than it ever had when he lived alone. And so began their life together. Days passed, and then weeks, and the strangeness of the situation gradually faded into something that felt almost normal. The young man would work in his fields during the day, and when he returned home in the evening, the woman would be there, waiting with a warm meal and a gentle smile. They spoke little, but their silences were comfortable, filled with a kind of understanding that did not require words. And the small sack of rice, mysteriously, impossibly, never grew empty. No matter how much they ate, no matter how many meals the woman prepared, when the young man looked at the sack, it always appeared just as full as it had been on that first night. He wanted to ask her about it, wanted to understand how such a thing could be, but something held him back. Perhaps he was afraid that asking would break the spell, would cause this gentle dream to dissolve like mist in sunlight. The woman, for her part, seemed content. She moved through the house like a spirit of peace, touching nothing that she did not make more beautiful, speaking no word that did not bring comfort. The young man found himself growing more and more fond of her, though he still did not truly understand who she was or why she had come. But he was happy. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was truly, deeply happy. The house no longer felt empty. The evenings no longer felt lonely. There was warmth where there had been only silence, companionship where there had been only solitude. Autumn deepened, and the air grew colder. The leaves on the trees turned gold and red, and then fell, carpeting the ground in a rustling blanket of colour. The young man harvested his rice crop, working from dawn to dusk, cutting the stalks, bundling them, threshing the grain. It was hard work, but this year it felt lighter somehow, knowing that someone was waiting for him at home. Frost began to silver the morning grass. One evening, as winter began to announce its approach, with frost on the grass and a sharper bite to the wind, the woman came to him with a request. "Husband," she said, using the word for the first time, and it made something warm bloom in the young man's chest. "I would like to ask something of you." "Of course," he said, "anything." "I would like you to build me a room," she said. "A small room, separate from the rest of the house, a place where I can work in private." The young man was puzzled, but he nodded. "What kind of work?" he asked. "I would like to weave," the woman said. "I would like to make cloth. I have some skill at it, and I believe I could make something beautiful, something we could sell at the market. It would help us, would it not, to have a little extra money?" The young man thought about this. It was true that they lived simply, and any extra income would certainly be welcome. And if weaving made his wife happy, then he wanted to help her do it. "Of course," he said, "I will build you a weaving room, but we do not have a loom. How will you weave without a loom?" "Do not worry about that," the woman said, with that same mysterious smile. "I will manage, but there is one condition. You must promise me, on everything you hold dear, that you will never, ever look inside the room while I am weaving. You must give me your word that you will respect my privacy absolutely. Can you promise me this?" The young man hesitated. It was a strange request. But then again, everything about this woman was strange. And if it was important to her, if it was the price of her happiness, then he would pay it gladly. "I promise," he said, "I will never look inside the room while you are weaving. You have my word." The woman smiled, and it was a smile of such relief and gratitude that the young man felt certain he had made the right choice, even if he did not understand it. The next day, he set to work building the weaving room. He chose a spot at the back of the house, away from the main living area, and he built walls of wood and paper, carefully fitting each piece together. He made the door solid and strong, with no cracks or gaps that would allow someone to see inside. It took him 3 days to complete the room, but when he was finished, it was perfect, small, private, secure. The woman inspected it with careful eyes, nodding her approval. "Thank you," she said. "This is exactly what I needed." That evening, after they had finished their meal, the woman rose and said, "I am going to begin my work now. Please, remember your promise. Do not look inside, no matter what you hear, no matter how long I am in there. Wait for me to come out on my own." "I remember," the young man said. "I will not look. I promise." The woman bowed to him, then turned and walked to the new room. She slid the door open, stepped inside, and closed it firmly behind her. The young man heard the soft sound of something being moved, adjusted, arranged, and then, after a moment, a new sound began. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack of a weaving loom, steady and hypnotic as a heartbeat. The sound filled every corner of the house. The young man settled himself in the main room and tried to go about his evening as he normally would. But it was difficult to concentrate on anything. The sound of the loom filled the house, constant and unchanging, and with it came a sense of something happening, something important, something he could not see or understand. Hours passed, the sun set, and darkness filled the house. The young man lit a lamp, but the light seemed feeble and small against the weight of the mystery unfolding behind that closed door. Still, the sound of the loom continued, never pausing, never slowing. Eventually, exhausted by the day's work and lulled by the steady rhythm, the young man lay down and fell asleep. When he woke in the morning, the sound was still going. Clack, clack, clack. Endless, tireless, mechanical. He rose, prepared his own simple breakfast, and went out to work in his fields, the sound of the loom still echoing in his mind. The day passed slowly. The young man found it hard to focus on his work. His thoughts kept returning to the house, to his wife, to what she might be doing in that sealed room. But he had made a promise, and he would keep it. He had given his word. Evening came, and he returned home, hoping to find her there, waiting for him as usual. But the house was silent, except for the sound of the loom, still weaving, still working. He prepared his own meal, ate alone, and then lay down again to sleep, the loom's rhythm following him into his dreams. Another day passed, and another, and another. For 7 days and 7 nights, the woman did not emerge from the weaving room. For 7 days and 7 nights, the sound of the loom never stopped. The young man went about his work, ate his solitary meals, and waited, worry growing in his heart like a shadow. Was she all right? Was she eating, drinking, resting? But he had promised not to look, and so he did not look, though it cost him dearly in anxiety and sleepless nights. On the evening of the 7th day, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, the sound of the loom finally stopped. The young man, who had just returned from his fields, froze in place, his heart suddenly pounding. The silence was so sudden, so complete, that it felt almost shocking after 7 days of that constant rhythm. He heard movement behind the door, soft footsteps. Then the door slid open, and his wife emerged. The young man gasped. She had changed. She was thinner, so much thinner that her bones seemed to press against her skin. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and there were dark shadows beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond simple tiredness, as if some essential part of her had been drained away. But in her hands, she carried something that made the young man forget his worry, forget everything except the sheer beauty of what he was seeing. It was cloth. Cloth such as he had never seen before in his life. It shimmered in the lamplight, colours shifting and changing as she moved, blues and whites and silvers flowing together like water, like sky, like something not quite of this world. The fabric was so fine, so delicate, that it seemed almost weightless, as if it might float away if released. "Take this to the marketplace," the woman said, her voice faint but steady. "Sell it. It will bring a high price. Use the money for whatever we need." The young man took the cloth from her hands, marvelling at its texture, soft as a whisper, smooth as silk, but somehow even finer. "This is," he began, but words failed him. "This is extraordinary." "Thank you," the woman said simply. Then, swaying slightly, she moved past him and sank down onto the tatami floor. "I am very tired. I need to rest now." "Of course," the young man said quickly, his concern returning. "Rest. I will take care of everything." He watched as she lay down, curling on her side like a child, and within moments she was asleep, her breathing slow and deep. The young man carefully folded the precious cloth and set it aside, then prepared a light meal and placed it nearby in case she woke hungry. Then he too lay down to sleep, though his mind was full of questions. The marketplace bustled with morning voices. The next morning, the woman was still sleeping, so the young man left her to rest and set off for the town with the cloth carefully wrapped and tucked under his arm. The marketplace was busy when he arrived, full of merchants and customers, the air alive with the sounds of bargaining and barter. He found a textile merchant, an old man with shrewd eyes, and carefully unwrapped the cloth. The merchant's reaction was immediate and intense. His eyes widened, his hands reached out, trembling slightly, to touch the fabric. "This," he breathed. "Where did you get this?" My wife made it, the young man said. The merchant looked up at him, disbelief and awe warring on his face. Your wife? This is the work of a master weaver, perhaps the finest I have ever seen. The thread, the pattern, the quality. I have never encountered anything like it. Will you buy it? The young man asked. Buy it? The merchant laughed, a sound of pure joy. My friend, I will give you more money for this single piece of cloth than you have probably earned in an entire year. He disappeared into his shop and returned moments later with a heavy purse, jingling with coins. He counted them out, one by one, and the young man watched in amazement as the pile grew and grew. When the merchant was finished, the young man was holding more wealth than he had ever possessed in his life. If your wife can make more, the merchant said eagerly, bring them to me. I will buy every piece. There are lords and ladies who would pay fortunes for cloth of this quality. The young man thanked him, pocketed the money, and made his way home in a daze. This changed everything. With money like this, they need never worry about food or shelter, or any of the small hardships that had been his constant companions. They could live comfortably, they could have a good life. When he arrived home, he found his wife awake, looking somewhat recovered, though still pale. He showed her the money, told her what the merchant had said, and she smiled, a tired but genuine smile. I am glad, she said. I am glad I could help. Over the following weeks, the woman gradually regained her strength. Colour returned to her cheeks, and the shadows beneath her eyes faded. She moved through the house again with her usual grace, preparing meals, tending to small tasks, and the young man was relieved to see her restored. He used some of the money to buy better food, warmer clothes for the winter, small luxuries they had never been able to afford before. The rest he saved, carefully storing it away. Life was good. Life was better than he had ever dared to hope. But as winter deepened and the snow began to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white, the woman came to him again. I would like to weave another cloth, she said. The young man felt a flicker of concern. He remembered how exhausted she had been, how frail she had looked after those 7 days of weaving. Are you certain? He asked. You do not need to. We have enough money. We can live comfortably for a long time. I am certain, the woman said. I want to do this. Please, let me. And because he loved her, because he wanted her to be happy, the young man agreed. Once again, the woman shut herself in the weaving room. Once again, the sound of the loom began, that steady, hypnotic clack, clack, clack that filled the house. The young man tried to go about his work as usual, but it was harder this time. The worry was stronger, the sense that something was being sacrificed, something precious and irreplaceable. Each night, lying alone in the darkness, listening to that ceaseless sound, he felt a growing unease in his heart. Again, 7 days passed, 7 days during which the woman did not emerge, did not eat, did not rest, as far as he could tell. 7 days of that endless weaving. On the 7th night, as he lay on his futon unable to sleep, a terrible curiosity began to grow in the young man's mind. How was she doing this? How was she creating such beautiful cloth? What was the secret? Was there truly a loom in that room? Was she truly all right? He told himself he would not look. He had promised. He had given his word. But the curiosity grew and grew, like a living thing inside him, feeding on his worry and his wonder. What could it hurt? Just a small peek, just to reassure himself that she was safe. She would never know. He would be so careful, so quiet. The young man rose from his futon, his heart pounding. He moved through the darkness toward the weaving room, his feet silent on the tatami. The sound of the loom was louder here, filling his ears, filling his skull. He reached the door. His hand trembled as he raised it. Just a tiny crack, he told himself, just enough to see that she is well. He slid the door open, just a fraction of an inch, and put his eye to the gap. What he saw froze the blood in his veins. The room was lit by a single small lamp, and in its flickering light, he could see the loom, and at the loom, working the shuttle back and forth with tireless precision, was not his wife. It was a crane. A white crane, brilliant as snow, with black-tipped wings and a red crown on its head. The same crane he had saved weeks ago in his field. He knew it, recognized it in every line of its body, in the particular curve of its neck, in the way it moved. But that was not the worst of it. That was not what made his heart break in his chest. The crane was plucking out its own feathers, one by one, pulling them from its body with its long beak, and weaving them into the cloth on the loom. The fabric was growing, thread by thread, feather by feather, and each feather that was pulled left a small wound, a tiny spot of blood on those white wings. The crane was weaving itself into the cloth. Literally, physically, pulling pieces of itself away to create the beauty that the young man had sold. He understood then, in one terrible moment of clarity, what the cloth truly cost. Not money, not time, but something far more precious. The crane was giving away her very self, piece by piece, thread by thread. The young man must have made some sound, some small gasp of horror and understanding, because the crane suddenly stopped its work and turned its head. Their eyes met, human and bird, man and spirit, and in that instant, everything changed. The crane's eyes were dark and deep, and filled with an emotion that the young man recognized, even across the gulf between their kinds. Sadness, disappointment, resignation. And yet, even now, even after he had broken his promise, there was still something like love in that gaze. Slowly, the crane set down the shuttle. Slowly, it stood, its movements heavy with exhaustion. And then, before the young man's disbelieving eyes, the form began to shift and change. Feathers became skin, wings became arms, and in a matter of heartbeats, his wife stood there before him, wearing her pink kimono, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked at him, and in her eyes was that same sadness, that same disappointment. "You looked," she said softly. It was not an accusation. It was simply a statement of fact, heavy with the weight of inevitability. I am sorry," the young man stammered, his voice breaking. "I did not mean. I was worried. I only wanted to." But the words died in his throat, because he knew they were not enough, could never be enough. He had broken his promise. He had violated her trust. And there was no taking that back, no way to undo what had been done. The woman, his wife, the crane, shook her head slowly. "I am the crane that you saved," she said. "The crane that you showed kindness to when it was wounded and helpless. I wanted to repay that kindness. I wanted to give you happiness, security, a life free from worry. I became human and came to you, and I was happy here. I truly was happy." Her voice was gentle, but there was a finality in it that made the young man's heart sink like a stone. "But now," she continued, "you have seen my true form. You have seen the secret that I needed to keep, and because you have seen, I cannot stay. The magic that allowed me to remain here, to be with you, has been broken. I must leave." "No," the young man said, and his voice was raw with desperation. "Please, do not go. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I will never look again. I will do anything. Please." But the woman was already moving back into the weaving room. She emerged a moment later, carrying the cloth she had been making, the second piece, even more beautiful than the first. She held it out to him, and he took it with trembling hands. "I leave you this to remember me by," she said. "Sell it or keep it, as you choose, but please, remember that I loved you. Remember that I was happy here, for however brief a time." "You cannot go," the young man said again, tears streaming down his face now, his voice breaking completely. "Please, you are my wife. I love you. Please do not leave me." "I have no choice," the woman said, and her own eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This is the way of things. You saved me once, and I tried to repay that debt, but now the debt is paid, and I must return to what I was, what I am. I am sorry. I am so sorry." She stepped past him and walked toward the door of the house. The young man followed, reaching out as if to stop her, but she moved away from his touch, gentle but firm. She slid open the door and stepped out into the winter night. Snow was falling, soft and silent, covering everything in white. The moon was full and bright overhead, turning the world into a landscape of silver and shadow. The woman stood there for a moment, her back to him, her shoulders trembling slightly. Then she began to change. Her form blurred, shifted, and in an instant she was a crane again, white and beautiful and otherworldly. The crane turned to look back at him one last time. Then it spread its wings, those same wings that it had plucked so many feathers from, wings that bore small scars now, signs of the sacrifice it had made. It launched itself into the air, and the young man watched as it rose higher and higher, circling once above the house, twice, 3 times, just as it had done on that first day when he had freed it from the arrow. Its cry echoed through the cold night air, a sound of farewell and gratitude and sorrow all mixed together. And then it flew away, its white form growing smaller and smaller against the dark sky, until it was just a speck, just a memory, just a dream. And then it was gone. The snow fell without ceasing. The young man stood in the doorway for a long time, snow gathering on his shoulders, tears freezing on his cheeks. He stood there until the cold became too much to bear, and then he turned and went back inside, closing the door behind him. The house felt emptier than it ever had before, more empty than when he had lived alone, before the crane woman had come. Because now he knew what he was missing. Now he understood what he had lost. He looked down at the cloth he still held in his hands. It was beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful than the first. But looking at it now, all he could think of was the price that had been paid for it, the feathers plucked, the wounds endured, the sacrifice made. He folded the cloth carefully and put it away in a wooden chest. He did not take it to the marketplace. He did not sell it. It was not his to sell. It was a gift, a memory, a reminder of love and loss and the cost of breaking promises. The days that followed were difficult. The young man went through the motions of his life, working in his fields, eating his meals, sleeping when sleep would come, but everything felt hollow, colourless, flat. The joy had gone out of the world. Winter deepened, and the snow continued to fall, piling high in drifts around his house. The young man would sometimes stand outside and look up at the sky, hoping to see a white crane passing overhead. But he never did. The crane had returned to her world, to her kind, to the life she was meant to live. And he was left with his memories and his regrets. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind was howling and the house creaked around him, he would take out the cloth and hold it in his hands, feeling its impossible softness, seeing its impossible beauty. And he would think about the woman who had given up so much to repay a simple act of kindness. He would think about the happiness they had shared, brief as it was. And he would think about the lesson he had learned, hard and bitter as it was. Trust, once broken, cannot easily be mended. Promises, once violated, cannot easily be unmade. Some secrets are meant to be kept. Some boundaries are meant to be respected. And to cross them is to lose something precious and irreplaceable. The young man lived out the rest of his days alone, never marrying, never seeking another wife. He tended his fields, he grew his rice, he lived his simple life. But a part of him, the part that the crane woman had touched, remained forever marked by her presence and her absence. In time, the story of the young man and the crane wife became a tale, told in the villages nearby, passed from one generation to the next. A tale of gratitude and love, of sacrifice and loss, of the price of curiosity and the importance of trust. And sometimes, on winter nights when the moon is full and the snow is falling soft and silent, people say you can still hear the cry of a crane echoing through the darkness. Some say it is just an ordinary bird, going about its ordinary business. But others, those who know the story, those who understand the deeper truths that hide beneath the surface of the world, believe it is the crane wife, calling out across the distance, remembering the young man who saved her life and then broke her heart. And perhaps, in some way that we cannot quite understand, the young man hears her too. Perhaps, wherever he is now, in whatever realm the souls of the departed go to rest, he hears that cry and remembers. Remembers the feel of her hand in his, the sound of her voice, the warmth of her smile. Remembers the happiness they shared and the sorrow of its ending. The seasons continue their turning. Spring follows winter, summer follows spring, autumn follows summer, and winter comes around again. The cycle never ends, never pauses, never looks back. But the memory of the crane wife endures, delicate as the cloth she wove, precious as the feathers she gave, eternal as the bond between a life saved and a debt repaid. And in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the stillness between breaths, the story lives on, teaching its gentle lesson to anyone willing to listen. Be kind, it whispers, be trustworthy, respect the boundaries of others, honor your promises, and understand that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some secrets are not meant to be revealed. And remember, always remember, that love is not possession. Love is not control. Love is the ability to let something fly free, even when everything in you wants to hold on, to keep, to never let go. The crane flew because she had to fly. That was her nature, her truth, herself. And the young man, in his sorrow and his wisdom too late learned, came to understand that his love for her should have included the willingness to let her remain a mystery, to let her keep her secrets, to trust her without needing to understand everything. It is a hard lesson, and a painful one. But it is also, perhaps, the most important lesson of all. The night is deep now and quiet. The moon has climbed high into the sky, casting its silver light over the sleeping world. Somewhere, a crane flies through that moonlight, white wings beating steadily, carrying it onward through the vast darkness. And somewhere too, a young man sleeps, or perhaps does not sleep, remembering what was and what might have been, and what can never be again. The wind whispers through the trees, the snow falls soft and steady, and the world turns on, indifferent and eternal. And the story ends, as all stories must, leaving behind only the lingering echo of a crane's cry, fading into silence, fading into memory, fading into the endless quiet dark. Sleep now. Sleep, and dream of white wings and silver moonlight, and the small, perfect acts of kindness that can change a life, that can bridge worlds, that can turn a lonely winter into a brief, bright season of happiness. Sleep, and let the story settle into your heart like snow settling on the earth, soft and silent and complete. Sleep. And so the tale is told, whispered from one soul to another across the years, a reminder that in this floating world, all things are temporary, all things are precious, and all things are beautiful, even in their ending.